And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. I've been pretty good. I've been able to do a Thursday night live every single week of 2024 lately. And if you guys don't know, I go live every Thursday night at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've been pretty good at it. Tonight's going to be one of those nights I'm going to have to cut it off a little bit early because I got some stuff I got to do. But just when you're like, okay, there's nothing really crazy happening in the Pokemon hobby, all of a sudden, bam, PSA acquires SGC. I think a lot of people are doing the speculation of like, what does this mean? And I think the fact of the matter is when you talk about PSA, when you talk about SGC, and then you talk about what we care about Pokemon, they're pretty disconnected. SGC, while they definitely do grade Pokemon, there has never been 1 second of one day where I ever really think of SGC as being a viable option for Pokemon. When it came to Pokemon and SGC, that was just out of pure need for grading during, the craziness of the pandemic. Where SGC really has stapled themselves as a good grader is where it comes to vintage sports. And for vintage sports, we're talking pre-1960s. 1960s, that's 60 plus years ago. I mean, that's where SGC has really made their name is in the niche vintage sports cards. So when it comes to Pokemon, it doesn't really matter. Now, PSA has already said that they're going to keep SGC as, in a way, like their own entity. And to quote, old Mason from Cardinal Gaming and all the younglings out there, it's a nothing burger. I've heard that word be thrown around a lot, but that's what this is. Well, at least when it comes to us in Pokemon, PSA acquiring SGC, it doesn't matter. Now, the only way I could ever, even in a hypothetical situation, seeing where PSA acquiring SGC actually does matter would be if in the future PSA just says that, okay, because SGC is now the same company, we respect SGC grades and you can cross-grade SGC cards, cross-grade them into PSA slabs, and they don't need to go through a review process. That would be the only caveat, and I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I do not see that being even in the slightest an option in the future. For those people that are just clinging on to that and hoping for it, sorry, I think you're going to be extremely disappointed, but I will give it a 0.001% chance. We're talking minuscule, that ever even being a possibility in the future where, SGC cards could be cross-graded into PSA slabs and there won't need to be a review process. And then if that's the case, maybe there would be some really, really cheap SGC cards that would sell for huge premiums, obviously cross over into PSA. It's just the same thing as a CGC slab. If in a hypothetical world PSA ever acquired CGC and then they say, okay, we now acquired CGC, and any CGC card can now be crossed over into PSA without a review process. I mean, look at what a PSA 10 base set first edition Charizard sells for. Look what a base set first edition SGC 10 Charizard sell for. You're talking the difference of tens of thousands to close to $100,000 difference in those grades between those two companies. So don't hold your breath. Sorry, but that would be the only thing I can see. Other than that, I think that this is just in a kind of a way meaningless. And I'm lucky. I mean, I don't know. Let me phrase this correctly. Nat Turner is not a friend, but it's somebody I'm an acquaintance with. He knows who I am. I know who he is. He's been on this channel before. He will be on this channel again sometime this summer. And if you guys don't know, Nat Turner is the president and CEO of Collectors, president and CEO of PSA. He's the one that's making the decisions. And I will have him on this channel again. Me and him have already discussed it privately that we are going to make this an annual thing. It has even been a year since the last time he was on. So most likely we're probably talking late summer is the chances of Nat coming back on this channel. So we're talking July, August, September, and even that's a long window of 3 months. But when he comes on, I'll be curious to ask him because I've already seen some memes floating around and I haven't been able to verify them. But if there is validity to this, when they asked Nat Turner for like a statement on acquiring SGC and his thought process, he said, "I'm bored." Now, I have not verified that that was in fact a real statement from Nat Turner, but I wouldn't put it past him. It's like, why did you acquire SGC? I was bored. Because I mean, these guys are PSA, they're monsters, you know? Pokemon is not a regulated market. But if you ever talked about monopolies, like when obviously like electronics aren't regulated, but you think about like all these companies that have gotten broken up from monopolies in the past, like a big one that probably comes to a lot of people's minds is Microsoft. Or let's just predate Microsoft and go back to the early days of Standard Oil. So John D. Rockefeller, if you don't know who he is, I'll give you a real quick like breakdown on the history of oil, because my background's in petroleum engineering, and oil is something I've always been fascinated by. Always been fascinated by history. But like originally, when they refined oil, the main thing that they want to get out of oil was kerosene, because before the I'm not going to I could do the whole history of oil, but I'm going to fast forward oil. Oh my God, I just was talking for so long and I had my phone in front of me waiting for an auction to end and I missed it. Oh no, what have I done? Oh, alright, the card sold for $535. Okay, I don't feel that bad. But anyways, like, Standard Oil, they were huge oil conglomerate. They were just bullied everybody out. Like, one of the things John Rockefeller would do is he would go into an area because, like, at the time, refineries, like, what would refine, kerosene was a big byproduct of oil refinery. And then, obviously, with the invention of the internal combustible engine, gasoline became a huge byproduct, and diesel and stuff like that. But at the time, there was no, like, big companies that owned all these little refineries. They were kind of, in a way, mom and pop refiners. So what John Rockefeller would do is he would come into an area and he would lower his price so like stupidly low that these little mom and pop refiners, they just couldn't compete with the price that John Rockefeller was selling his gas and his oil at. But in order to make up for the price where John Rockefeller would come in and push out these refiners, let's say he bought a refinery in New York. Well, he would jack up the price of oil in Mississippi or in California or in North Dakota or wherever. So he would raise the price in one area where there was no competition, and where the competition was, he would lower the price. So he would still make the same amount of money because he was raising price one place, lowering it at another, and all these mom and pop companies, they just couldn't compete. So then John Rockefeller would come in and say, hey, listen, I see you guys are struggling your refinery. Let me do you a favor. Let me buy you out. And that's what John Rockefeller would do. And then when Securities and Exchange Commissions and all these people came in, all these anti-monopoly people, they shut it down, and Standard Oil was the first one. And Standard Oil broke down into a ton of different companies. It was like Standard Oil used to be Exxon, Mobil, Sunoco. They were like the American arm of like Royal Dutch Shell, which ended up being Shell gasoline. What is it like? There was like a million. I forget how many companies the Rockefellers had to break into. Hess. I want to BP. Like all these huge companies were all like part of Standard Oil at one time. He was a monster. He at one point, John Rockefeller, controlled 90% of the world's refining capabilities. 90%. John Rockefeller was the monopoly of the monopoly. Like if you ever want, and when you talk about people being rich, when you talk about the richest people in history, John Rockefeller, when you take into account like the value of the dollar then versus now, John Rockefeller is one of the richest people to ever walk this earth, until eventually they came in and broke up. But if you combined all the companies I just explained, Exxon, Mobil, Hess, BP, these are all Fortune 500 companies. These Fortune 500 companies were broken up out of like one monopoly, which was Standard Oil. Just John Rockefeller had fake money. And if you ever want to get into like deep down a rabbit hole of just like like eminent domain cases and property transfers and stuff like that. Like a lot of the Rockefeller estate, they have these fucking amazing lawyers, right? And they bought all this property and then they like gifted it to these towns and stuff, and they turned them into parks with like the caveat of this property has to be a park forever. Well, like local towns and states, they try to come in and they try the eminent domain, a lot of this stuff, like decades after the fact, long after John Rockefeller was dead. But like his lawyers and like the Rockefeller Trust just bankrupts these towns and states if they try the eminent domain anything with legal fees. It's just wild. But anyways, that was my tangent. But SGC, PSA, are we starting to move into like the monopoly aspect of grading? I think it's a legit conversation, because if you were going to name like the four big grading companies, I'm sure everybody would say PSA number one. Depending on who you are, you're going to bounce it back and forth between BGS and CGC. If you're going by just cards graded, go with, CGC. If you're going to go with like value for your money, if you're going to go after that black label, you're going to go with Beckett for value. And then probably the fourth grading company for a lot of people would have been SGC. So now PSA is two of the top four. And the difference between PSA and whoever you think is number two, whether you think it's CGC or whether you think it's Beckett, PSA is a million miles away from them. I mean, it's wild. And then plus PSA, because PSA is owned by Collectors, and Collectors owns like PCGS coin graded, and they also own WADA Games and stuff. It's wild. And, PSA has the ability, if they want in the future, to like still enter into more things for Pokemon too, whether that's, expanding like what they grade and stuff. And PSA's got a bright future ahead of them. And if PSA could continue to do well, I'm a big CGC fanboy at this point. Like, there's no denying it. It's what PSA has done. I mean, there was a point where the PSA pop report was hidden behind a paywall, and it was Joe Orlando got rid of that. Like, that PSA's history goes back a long time, till they were the first one to introduce pop reports. Like, that changed the game. And then to introduce pop reports to the masses, to the public, that was a game changer. And now, like, in the last couple years, it's like, well, what has PSA done? PSA killed like a multi-million card backlog, and PSA has been able to get their bulk turnaround times to less than 2 months. So what is that, like 60 business days they've been or less than 60 business days? 2 months is what, 40 business days they've been able to knock down their bulk turnaround times. Like, PSA's doing fucking big things. And then, one of the big things Nat Turner pushed when he became the president and CEO of PSA was he pushed PSA to like take photos of your cards before grading and after grading. And that's been a huge difference maker. And especially if you like to, sell cards on eBay, to just go on that submission, to be able to download those high-res scans that PSA does. Listen, are they perfect? No. But do they make your life a lot easier, especially when you're a seller, to just go on PSA, download those photos, and then just post them right into your eBay listing? You would bet your ass. Like, that's been huge. So since, Nat Turner's taken over and Collectors, we've seen turnaround times go from because keep in mind, when the turnaround times during the pandemics got crazy, that was before Nat Turner and Collectors came in and acquired. And the first thing Nat Turner did and the first thing Collectors did was they just turned off the faucet. They stopped accepting graded card submissions. That was the first thing he did. That's a huge step. And then we're already starting to see like a lot of things that they're introducing, a lot of things they're rolling out. The photos of the cards being the big thing, and now they're really moving into the mobile app. Since he's been here, we've already seen, all these cards were at one point getting graded in California. Then they opened up the Jersey office, and then we're starting to see the Jersey office take a lot of this burden, especially when it comes to Pokemon. And they for a while they had like a submission center in Japan, but now Japan is grading their own cards, so you don't have to ship them overseas. Like, there's graders in Japan, which have helped turnaround times like drastically lower. And during the live, Nat Turner, one of the things he mentioned was having a PSA hub in either Europe or like the UK. I know a lot of people were upset that he even mentioned the UK because of like Brexit and stuff and taxes and import fees and everything. It'd be tricky that way. So they want to be more central and like, the European Union opposed to just the UK, so people didn't have to cost a ton of money. But like PSA, what did I just say? They were just grading cards in California. Then they started grading cards in Jersey, which made it easier on Pokemon. Then they opened up a Japanese grading card office. Nat Turner's currently in the process of looking at UK grading places. When I look at grading companies, okay, if I grade a card today, where's going to be the most value for that card? And it's probably going to be PSA. But then when I ask myself the question, okay, well now what if I put this card into my personal collection in a 5-year timeline, in a 10-year timeline? Who do I see's slab holding the most value? And every single time it's PSA because of what they're working towards. And all the steps, in my opinion, that PSA are taken are the steps moving into the future, and they're not steps moving backwards. And I know a lot of people are talking about AI grading and stuff, and when Nat Turner was on my channel for that interview, Nat answered that question as perfectly as I could hope anybody could answer that question. Nat Turner said, they're not afraid to start looking at AI, and he said one of the big things he could look at for AI was centering, because when you could have a card be scanned, you could get that perfect, you could get a true understanding of what the centering is, whether it's 60-40, whatever. And then potentially when you go look up that card cert, you would be able to see that data. And then he said, but he would never want to go fully AI. And not only did he say that, not only did he say they wouldn't ever go fully AI, he said there is like a human element that is involved in cards, and he talked about it as simple as the feel of the card, or that like look of the card, like a certain glare, and he even talked about something so much as the smell of the card. And if you have been around cardboard long enough, if you've been around Pokemon long enough, when you hear somebody talk about, overall eye appeal and grading a card, you need to hear those things. And if you don't know what those things mean, if you are reading this and you're like, smell of cards or feel of cards or shine of cards, if you think none of that matters, you are not deep enough down the rabbit hole. Eventually you will get deep enough down the rabbit hole and you will realize, like, yes, all those things do matter. And like the eye appeal grade, that's like one of the more iffy, like, a lot of people are hesitant on the eye appeal grade, but eye appeal matters for cards, especially at high grades. But, PSA has their share of mess ups too. A lot of people out there tell me I never talk shit about PSA. Well, I've been talking about that trim Charizard a lot. I'm going to this is going to be my hot take of today's video, and then I'm probably not going to go too much longer. I'll probably only go like 25 minutes in today's video, but this is going to be my hot take. In my opinion, that first edition Charizard is trimmed. It is the most, in my opinion, the most evident example of a trim card we have ever seen on that high of a scale in Pokemon. Now, I could be different. There could be another trimmed first edition Charizard that I'm not aware of. Maybe there's a trimmed Illustrator that I'm not aware of. I know that there is that marked or altered Illustrator, one that had been colored in, but as for trim, don't know of any cards really on the highest end of the hobby that have been trimmed. That Charizard seems very, very, very clearly like trimmed. The thing that bothers me, and bothers maybe a rough word and probably like a poor usage of word, but something that makes me a little nervous and a little scared. There are some people out there who I trust their opinions in this hobby to the utmost level, and I believe that they have, the name of this channel is Pokéknowledge. When it comes to Pokéknowledge, there's a group of people out there that I think are on the highest levels of that. And it makes me so nervous to see some of those people. It's not a lot of people, but it's few people out there. And they know who they are. The people out there that do not believe that that card is trimmed. That is crazy to a fault. And I love you guys. Anybody out there who doesn't think that that card is trimmed, well, I love you. I love all you guys from the bottom of my heart. But I want you to look at that card. Look at it just objectively. Like, if it was trimmed, what would it look like? And if you don't think that that card looks trimmed, Rattle's put out fucking all-star videos recently. You know, I was able to look at it and say, this card looks trimmed. Rattle's been able to overlay that card onto other cards. Listen, I'm just telling you from the absolute bottom of my heart that that card looks trimmed. It's a different size than a normal card. It has a clean cut. The same way as if I trim a card, I leave the same exact cut. So, and if people out there are just saying that, no, this card is just a factory misprint thing, then that means now, in their, like, judgment, that you can just trim cards, and that is not okay. Because if you do not believe that that card is trimmed, and you truly don't believe it's trimmed, then you're leaving, like, the hobby open to... And these are guys that I trust them. If I were to give them a card, I would feel that they could give me, like, here, grade this. And they could look at it and give me a fair, objective grade and be like, okay, this card's a 5. This is a 10. This is a 9. But if it was trimmed and now their objective is, oh, that might be, like, factory wear... I challenge these guys to go out and buy a freaking paper shredder. Here, I have one. Go out. This is like $15 on Amazon, and this is the cheapest one they sell. Go out. Just cut a card and just look at it. Like, that is a trimmed... This is a trimmed bottom. I cut it. I put damage on the bottom. I cut it off. You can't tell. I mean, I'll cut it again. Look. Do you see that? Look. I just cut this off. You watched me do it. Look at that bottom. It's exactly the same cut as that Charizard. Look. You just put this right back. That's all it takes. You just got a little teeny whitening. Like, it's just wild that people are so... They don't believe that it's possible. Like, it just makes me nervous. I have some beat up cards somewheres, but I don't have any, like, near me. I should have thought about this more, but like this was just like a cheap card, but like it's the same cut. I don't know. I don't know. There were some hot takes where people are like, this is factory, this is normal. I've pulled cards like that, and it's like, listen, I've seen a lot of cards. I've handled a lot of cards. I feel if I saw a trim card, I would be able to identify it. And what that Charizard is exactly what I would identify. Rattle put the videos together where people are able to take exact measurements because of the high quality scans, compare it to other known examples of cards, and show that the size of that card is off. Like, the card clearly looks trimmed. It's not the same size as a normal Pokemon card. And when you overlay it, you can see the strip of card that is missing. And I don't get it. I don't understand. It just makes me nervous. It makes me nervous for this hobby in general. Listen, I might be wrong because it is my opinion, but I think that I'm not a buyer of that. First of all, I'm not a buyer of first edition Charizard because I'm way too poor. I would be a seller of a first edition Charizard if it ever came across my hands, but I would not be a buyer of that card, but it just looks... Like, I'm telling you, just objectively look at it and like, go trim your own fucking card. Do it. Go on Amazon. Look, Amazon. Look, I got a PSA. That's for packs. That's PSA. That's for different cut packs. There's like a CGC. When I cut cardboard, I'm able to just like cut as fast as you can cut cardboard. This thing is as dull as they get, but it still makes a clean cut. And it doesn't take much to cut off to trim that card. I don't know. Alright, that's my rants. Sorry, guys. I'm going to go look at the chat real quick. I told you I can't really go super long tonight because I got work stuff I got to do. But I will be around this weekend. Sword of Shield Era said PK's thumbnail looks so serious. That's an older thumbnail. I do like that. That's Scarface, where he's sitting at the table, and I just added a bunch of Pokemon product to it. See, number one mod in the game, Drew. Good to see you, buddy. Kevin Clear, good to see you. Cashmere Fire says, PSA owns WADA, and I wish they would change it to PSA Games. Ooh, yeah. Angel says, collectors acquired SGC, not PSA. What a trash title, bro. Wait, what? What a trash title. Collectors acquired SGC, not PSA. Oh, Angel, it's not about... What are you talking about, man? You don't know anything about clickbait. Welcome to the land of YouTube. That's the title, man. Angel. You're not an angel. You're a grumpy man. We're gonna work on the clickbait titles. I one time made a video titled Clickbait. Gladiator Collectible says PK gets that twinkle in his eye when he talks about card appeal, yes. Violent Wood Squirrel said, starting from the beginning, thanks for the content, PK. What's your 2 favorite boxes in Sword and Shield? Brilliant Stars is my number 1, and while I hate to say it because I feel like it's the simple answer, is Evolving Skies is my number 2, but those would be my top 2. Brilliant Stars right now I think is like the best bang for your buck when it comes to value, just because, I mean, obviously Brilliant Stars, Charizard set, but it still has awesome cards in it, and it's got, yeah, it's just got like great character rares to it. Sorry, I went and looked for some. I don't have any Brilliant Stars character rares next to me, but no, Brilliant Stars, solid. But yeah, those would be my top 2 Sword and Shield sets. Would definitely be, and again, that's all subjective, right? For me to say Brilliant Stars is my number 1, probably a lot of people want it, and then yeah, and then so if I had the rank, I could probably do my top 5. So number 1's Brilliant, number 2's Evolving, number 3 is probably Lost Origins, followed by Silver Tempest, and then, believe it or not, this might be a hot take, is, Chillin' Rain. Chillin' Rain probably number 5 on my list. And then Astral's right below Chillin' Rain, and then probably just Battle Styles, or no, Vivid Voltage, Battle Styles, and then, probably Rebel Clash, then Sword and Shield base because of the Marnie, and then Rebel Trash at the bottom. Or did I miss Darkness Blaze? I don't know. Gladiator Collectible says PK rolls out of bed and puts that hat on first thing in the morning. See, that's a difference, Gladiator. I never take the hat off, so I just fall asleep with the hat on. I wake up, the hat's still on. We're good to go. Let's see. So BT Mo says, when a monopoly exists, cheap prices don't exist, premiums do, yes. I mean, you think about, there was a while where when it came to like computer processing systems, it was just Internet Explorer and like Microsoft Word and stuff. And do you remember the days of Internet Explorer? Like, I'm sure that my chat can't be that old, or that young, sorry. Everybody uses their Google Chromes now and, all these different things. It was Internet Explorer or bust for a while. And the thing that Microsoft had going on for it was because it had the processing system. So anytime people bought a new computer, those were like the programs that were already pre-installed, was your Internet Explorers and stuff. Shit, I don't even know. Does Internet Explorer even exist? Like, I know there's Microsoft Edge now and stuff, but there was a while that there was nobody else. And then Apple was obviously like a number 2, but they were really, really competing like tough. And, there's stories where like Steve Jobs so there's awesome stories about Microsoft too. So like one of the cool stories is obviously Bill Gates went to Harvard, but like there was a bunch of like these original computer programs. They went to Harvard, and, at the time these computers were like the size of rooms. They were massive. And in one of these computer science classes, like they were able to like practice on a computer, and the class figured out what the password for that computer was, because they were only allowed to actually like practice on that computer like a certain amount of hours per week. But Bill Gates and all his friends, they figured out what the code was. Shout out to Professor Oak. So they figured out what the code was for the computer, or the password, I should say, not the code. So the password was something easy. It was like 1111 or something. And because they knew the the passcode, they were able to just code on this computer for like 10,000 hours. So Bill Gates and his friends had, 10,000 plus hours of coding at a time, where like the next coder had 100 hours of coding time. Like him and his friends it was just because it was the time, right? Computers were expensive. Nobody was doing coding and stuff. So Bill Gates and all his friends, they had like 10,000 plus hours of coding, and everybody else in like the world didn't even have that much time coding. And they were able to use that, roll all this stuff into, what they ended up making. But then, Steve Jobs, he brought Bill Gates in to like, help move, because everyone was like, hey, when Steve Jobs created Apple and they were trying to create these programs, they're like, oh, there's this hotshot coder out there by the name of like, William Gates, shout out Bill Gates, you need to bring him on and he could help you like code your stuff. So Steve Jobs is like, okay, I'll bring this guy Bill Gates on. He brought him on, and one of the things he brought him on for was like the Apple's equivalent of Microsoft Word. And Steve Jobs had this like really weird like thing about him where he really was like deep into fonts. And like now if you go on Microsoft Word and you click on fonts, there's like a million different fonts, but like nobody understood like, Steve, you don't want all these fonts. But like that was a big thing Steve pushed at Microsoft. So then when that was a big thing Steve Jobs pushed at Apple. So when Bill Gates came to Apple to code for him, he just pretty much saw all the shit that Steve Jobs was doing, including like the fonts and stuff, and their equivalent of Microsoft Word, whatever the Apple equivalent was. And then all Bill Gates pretty much did was he did some coding for Steve Jobs, because that's what Steve Jobs asked for. And then fucking Bill Gates just turned around and pretty much stole all the ideas that Steve Jobs came up with. And so everything that was like the original foundation and backbone of Microsoft Word, all that shit was stolen from Steve Jobs and Apple, just because they brought Bill Gates in to do some coding for him. It was wild stuff, like super mastermind. I mean, that was some evil shit they did back then. All those guys were, and it was because of that Steve Jobs fucking hated Bill Gates for like until the day he died. And Steve Jobs did some wild stuff too. I mean, I forget where he left. Like Steve Jobs left Apple and then he went and like made his own computer company, making personal computers, sold that company back to Apple for like, $1 billion. Then he went on and created, was it Pixar or something? Is it Pixar? And then Pixar was bought out by Disney. And then at that time, like Apple was really struggling. So they, the Apple One and all the Apple personal computers, like they were struggling. So then they bring Steve Jobs back on to be CEO. And then like one of the first things Steve Jobs rolls out is the iPad, the original like iPad. And then Steve Jobs pretty much springboards the iPad into the iPhone. And then now you got that little Apple on the back of your phone. And ladies and gentlemen, the rest is history. Crazy. All right, guys. Love you. Appreciate the rants. Sorry I couldn't go live for that long tonight. I mean, I did go live for 30 minutes. I feel like that's what most people's videos are, like 30 minutes. But hey, guys, appreciate every single one of you. And as always, I'll catch you on the next video. I will be listening in my ear to the CTR live, so I think Drew could drop a link for that if you guys want to go hop in and see CTR. I know those guys are doing some absolute D-gen stuff. Shout out to CTR. He's doing some wild stuff. Like, he's doing next level YouTubing right now. I think it's going to be pretty wild, whatever he rolls that live into, because it's D-gen stuff to the max, and that's kind of shit I love. All right, guys. Appreciate every single one of you. And as always, I'll catch you on the next video.